Bear with me, anything that sounds much like a sermon this morning will be a little redundant, as Tom Rubright already delivered our sermon for the morning. But thank you for being here. This morning we're going to continue the series that we started last week, talking about kind of where we are and how we got here, and looking at this idea of insanity and how it applies to us, how it may apply to us, how it has applied to us in the past. This morning we'll spend a good portion of our time talking about this millennial generation. One of the things that I learned in my research of millennials here that I was just doing here recently was that I evidently now am one, which I wasn't ever before, but I am now. They had this weird kind of gap, almost like they had with the silent generation that Ray was talking about, where if you were born between 1980 and 83, they couldn't figure out what we were. And so they went through a dozen different names, and evidently now they've decided it's easier just to put us in with millennials and be done with it. So it's a wide range. One of the things that we'll talk about and why we're talking about it and why you guys hear so much about it in news and every form of media that you can imagine is that the millennial generation is the largest generation in the history of the United States. In numbers, millennials have surpassed the generation named for being the largest generation. Millennials now outnumber baby boomers at the largest time that they had. So it's interesting to go through and see. One of the questions that I got last week when I kind of introduced what we were going to talk about was, what are millennials? What does that look like? How is that defined? This morning, here in a few minutes, we'll have Jenna Beckler join us, who almost everyone in here knows very well. Jenna now works in human resources at Nestle in D.C., and prior to that, she still works with the National Millennial Community. She spent time when she was at Tennessee Tech. She was president of the National Millennial Community, so she's going to share some of her expertise with us this morning. David, I'm going to start this video clip here in just a second. So first thing I've got, though, is a short, about a 3-minute summary of some of the things that you have probably heard and seen of millennials, if this works, hopefully. As I said last week, millennials are by far the most fun to make fun of. However, we do also have to remember that millennials were raised, as we talked about, predominantly by baby boomers, and responsibility isn't a gene that mutated out. So, without further ado, let me introduce Jenna Beckler.
Hello.
There we go. Okay, so Jenna, tell me a little bit about what are millennials, who are millennials, what does that look like, factually speaking?
So, as mentioned earlier, millennials are about from the age of 1980 to 2000s. It depends on who you talk to. With me, I am in the kind of where Levi is. I'm in the age where I'm either a Gen Z or millennial, depending on who you talk to. Millennials are very hardworking. They're very innovative. They like to make their own paths, which with jobs is seen as unreliable because they like to hop around. But that's also because we want authenticity. We want to not settle. We want to have like the best option for us, which comes in the innovation. Because with innovation, you're constantly looking for what's going to work best, what's going to get you to your goal the quickest, which sometimes can be very irritating for other generations. It also can be a bad thing because, you know, if you're constantly going towards a goal, sometimes you don't have time to sit, look around. So that's something that we do have to work on, but it is definitely a highlight, I think. So that's kind of a summary. Okay, so you mentioned job hopping, and then we had several examples up here. What do you find in your expertise, in your travel, in your talking, in your experience? What are some of the most common misconceptions about millennials as a generation? So job hopping, one is that millennials don't stay around for more than 2 years at a job. We're lazy, we're unreliable, we don't want to own a house, we don't want to live outside of our parents' home, we want to be completely reliable on our parents, which hopefully no one thinks. I know with me personally, that's not my case at all, and I know a lot of my friends, and in the national millennial community, we have millennials from literally almost every state, and none of them are like that. They're very driven, and they want to be the best they can be. They want to own a house. They want to be at the point where they feel so successful that they don't have to work anymore. So very similar to
How old are you?
I'm 22.
Okay, so Jenna is 22, and where do you live?
Arlington, Virginia.
And
or
when did
DC.
you move there?
3 months ago.
Why did you move there?
For a job with Nestle.
And when did you graduate college?
4 months ago.
Okay, so ruining all of our statistics right here, ladies and gentlemen. So with all the misconceptions, if you could sum up what millennials are in one word, what would it be and why?
I would say innovation, like I mentioned earlier, because with millennials, we're not okay with being lukewarm, especially with our faith or with our job search or life. We don't want to just settle. We want to have the best we can be, and in the world today, we have that option. You can be an entrepreneur and come up with your own product and all of a sudden be a millionaire. That's possible for us. And so I think innovation really describes millennials in like one word.
Okay. So you said you had just moved to Arlington, entirely new place, new state, new everything. So tell us a little bit about, since you have moved there, and how long have you been there?
3 months.
So in 3 months, have you done any looking for a church? Have you looked for a church? Is that something you're going to do?
Yes, I visited quite a few churches. One church that's really stuck out with me, I've kind of started attending the past couple of times. One reason I stayed for the church is the service. It really challenges me because with lukewarm faith, that doesn't get you anywhere. You have to constantly be pushing your faith to grow closer to Jesus, and that's something that in a church I want. I don't want a sermon that just does surface level. I want to be driven in deep and make me question what I believe, so I will go back to the Bible or go back to mentors of mine and say, hey, I just had this thought. I've never thought this before. This is kind of shaking my faith. Where do I go from that? I visited some churches where I kind of, like the sermon, it kind of comes off as lukewarm because they don't want to drive in too deep because they don't want to scare away people who aren't deep in their faith. They want to stay very lukewarm to try to interact with non-believers, which can be good, but for the most part, that's not the best practice, in my opinion. I've also, because I am young, I'm looking for 20, 30 years old groups that I can have those relationships with, because I don't know anyone in DC. I don't really have a lot of friends yet, so I'm trying to build a relationship with Christians so I stay strong in my faith. And I'm constantly driven in my faith, which I had that here and at my university, Tennessee Tech University. I was very fortunate to have that. And that's kind of skyrocketed my faith and really prepared me to be an adult in a city that pretty much doesn't have Christians.
So you say one of the reasons you've been visiting the same church for a few weeks in a row was based on the challenging part of the sermon. And so not big flashy stuff and coffee bars and things like that?
Yeah, I've also noticed a lot of churches who want millennials do coffee bars, they do contemporary worship, they do late services, which can be great. In my opinion, if a sermon is so challenging that it shakes my faith and makes me believe that things that like I thought were completely wrong are right because God is so awesome and he loves us so much and he has so much forgiveness for us, then I'm willing to wake up at 9 a.m., even though I love sleeping in. And I mean, I love coffee, but if there's no coffee, if the sermon is really challenging and pulls me back, that's the church I'm going to pick. I'm not going to pick a church that has that lukewarm sermon with a coffee bar.
So is that Is that one of the ways that you think churches often miss the mark? What are some ways when churches are seeking millennials, as is the thing right now? What are some of the turn-offs? What are some things that if you visit a church you would leave for? Or what are some ways that churches claim to be trying to reach millennials and are just completely missing the mark?
So some things that would turn me off and have turned me off is, especially since I am young and I'm not in a relationship, so that's one thing with churches. They have a lot of couples who are 20-year-olds, and I went to one church and I was told, oh yeah, we have a great group of 20s and 30s. There's that couple, that couple, that couple, and then there's that one single, but we have more. But they didn't. So I don't really want to have like a flashy show. I want you to be real. If you're not that great with millennials right now or my age group, but you're working at it, I will stick around. I'm not just going to say, oh, wow, there's one person over there, but they're trying, but I'm going to leave. No, if they're wanting to work, I want to help them work for that. Because with me being so strong in my faith, that's kind of rare in the area that I live in, especially being so young. So if I can help a church grow with millennials, I will do that.
So talk for just a minute. You talked earlier about how depending on which research group you look at, you could fall into millennial, which is where you feel most comfortable, or Gen Z, possibly. I know your group has done some research with Gen Z. You've been to some training with that. Tell us just briefly what the next generation kind of looks like coming out.
So there's already stereotypes going with Gen Z, because with millennials, they've been the hot topic. I mean, you could see the video. Literally, there's many, many articles talking about how millennials are killing napkins and menus and straws, or they don't attend church. Like, there's so many things about millennials that now people are like, okay, that's old news, because they're realizing, wow, millennials aren't what we think they are. So now they're like, oh, there's this new generation that no one knows nothing about. Let's try to come up with something for them. I attended a workshop about Gen Z, and there's 3 words. One word that stuck out to me was anxiety, which a generation I don't think should be known for anxiety, because there's so much more about them than anxiety. With Gen Z, kind of the defining moment between Gen Z and millennials is that Gen Z has never known a time before, like any electronics, anything like that. They are very, very innovative with electronics, but they're also I'd say there's downfalls with technology, because technology now, we're involved in it so much in our lives. You can pull out an iPhone, find articles all over the web that may or may not be true. So right now, Gen Z, they're trying to still figure them out, because, Gen Z is very young. And it depends on the different areas that you go to for Gen Z, just like millennials. Because if you go to a rural area compared to a big city, they're going to be different millennials and different Gen Zers. Sure. But yeah. Okay. I don't think I answered all your question, but I don't remember.
No, you did. You did. You're good. So, all right. So tell me this: is church worth it? Like, is this model, this church buildings, is church worth it? And why?
My answer is 100% yes. One thing that, from going to different churches and being in a college ministry, I started noticing that there's a lot of talk about discipleship. And with discipleship, a lot of times what happens is people think, okay, so we're supposed to go out into the world and make disciples. So if I go to this church and I don't like this church, that means I can go out on my own. And I am prepared, I've read the Bible like 1 or 2 times, I got what I need, which is not the case. You need mentors, you need people who, mentors at every stage, not just when you're in high school, not just when you're in college. Like right now, I'm looking for mentors where I am, because it's a whole new battlefield. It's not like I just walk around and see 20 churches everywhere, and I hear everyone talking about how passionate they are about Jesus. I hear a lot of cussing. I hear all kinds of stuff that's, in my opinion, wrong with the world. So that's very hard. But yeah, I keep on losing my train of thought. I'm sorry.
You're good. So the church you're at now, you have started to plug into, and the reason why, like when you first got there to Arlington, what was the biggest thing that prompted you to start looking for a church to go to in the first place?
So I wanted to go to a church because I didn't want to lose my faith. Sorry, I might cry. This is a hard topic, but with being in a church, you have a group of people who have that commonality. You have the people who all believe Jesus. If I was doing it on my own, I feel like I would lose my faith, and I don't want to lose my faith.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you, Mel. Good job. Good job. Jenna is always amazing, and just to give you a heads up on how good she is, I hate two people doing conversational preaching. I really do. Like, it just makes me want to cringe because it always feels so practiced and so rehearsed. And so with Jenna, I refused to practice or rehearse or tell her what we were going to talk about. So most all of that was on the fly, as it should be. But I hope you heard a lot of the words that she used, a lot of the things that she talked about. Some things in particular, the idea of innovation, the idea of community, the idea of authenticity. One of the really, really big things that I hope you picked up on was that, notice that she said something that challenges or shakes her faith is good. Good. It's not scary, it's not terrifying, it's not something that'll make you leave, it's something that'll make you stay. Millennials, by and large, are not fearful of not having an answer for something because they have so many resources at their fingertips where they can go and research and find. And that's why you kind of see this resurgence in Christian apologetics, is people wanting to know, wanting to have ways of digging in deeper and looking at things. I want to share just a few. We're going to run through just a few statistics here. Generally speaking, millennials are the largest generation in U.S. history, bigger than the baby boomers at the peak. Right now, they make up about 25% of every living person in the United States. They are the best educated generation in history. But there are a few other things that go with that. Millennial professionals, here's the other thing, I think you probably picked up on what she said. Millennial professionals want to work in an environment that prioritizes the workers, even if it means giving up a bit of pay. Work-life balance defines success more than salary or money. Millennials crave a sense of purpose and want to feel engaged. That's not just at work. You heard her talking about she wants to be involved, wants to be a part of things. If something is happening, even if it's not perfect or it's not right or it's not done, then they want to be involved. They feel a drive to be a part of things and make things better, wherever they are, be that at work or school or at church. We talk a lot about millennials in that, statistically speaking, they are the highest educated and lowest paid generation in history. To give you an idea, median family income for a millennial is the same as it was for baby boomers at that age, even though they're born 30 to 50 years apart. The median family income is about the same. Here's one of the big things that'll stick out, though. It says 83% of millennials would give up a percentage of their salary in exchange for feeling like they were working for somewhere that was making a difference. Making a difference. They're twice as likely as any other generation before them, twice as likely as baby boomers to have a spouse who works full-time. They have the highest debt and the lowest savings of any generation in history. Most of that the debt coming from education as well. Your average millennial carries about $20,000 to $25,000 just in student loan debt per individual. Couple that with lowest income and salary for a long time, and you start to see why there are some of the stereotypes out there about millennial financial situations. Here's some things on millennials and religion that really stuck out. Depending on how someone defines Protestant, right? Like you can define Protestant, or you can split and do evangelicals, or all these different things. But roughly, if you look at it and you kind of get down in national surveys, Christians in a Protestant denomination of some kind come out to about 36% in millennials. Nuns, as we call them, the ones that are unaffiliated, where they mark literally what is your religion and they mark none, comes out to about 36%, about the same. But now here's the thing. Of the people who mark none, 71% are fairly certain that there is a God. 50% of the nones still say that religion is important or very important to them. 8 out of 10 millennials were raised in religious homes, but only about 5 out of 10 would identify as a Christian, and only about 2 out of 10 would say that that was important. This goes back to that 45% we were talking about, right? I think if you would say that being a Christian does not qualify as very important, I'm not sure that your self-identifying as a Christian is necessarily correct. My point in that is that the ones who mark none, we're not talking about atheists. It's not atheism. It's this place where, and it's also not talking about, New Age, I find God in yoga and meditation, right? Like it's people who still say God is real, religion is important, even say that Jesus is the only way and Christianity is it, but they're not comfortable being associated with corporate churches. To give you an idea of, the direction that church attendance is heading nationwide, we all know it's down everywhere. But if it continued on track, which, it never continues anything on track is how they think. But if attendance in churches in the United States were to continue on track, by 2050, so about 30 years from now, they'd say less than 12% of the population would attend a church building. In 1992, last statistic I'll give you on this. In 1992, the median age of a preacher was 44, and 1 in 3 preachers were under the age of 40. In 2017, the median age of a preacher is 11 years older. The median age of a preacher is 55. And only 1 in 7 preachers are under the age of 40, meaning the communities that the churches are trying to reach are getting younger, while church leadership is predominantly getting older. And asked at large, what is kind of the biggest thing that is important to millennials inside of churches and outside of churches? And what is the thing that would run someone off the fastest? The answer given is the same answer that Jenna gave. They all answer almost across the board this idea of anything inauthentic. Couple that with this. These, I think, are the 2 most important out of the statistics today. It says the quickest way to run a millennial off, turn a millennial off, cancel a millennial's buy-in, or make sure that a millennial does not come or does not return is anything inauthentic. The very next statistic is less than 50% of spiritual millennials, those who mark that religion is important. Less than 50% of millennials think that they can be themselves at church. 2/3 of people believe that their children cannot be allowed to be themselves at church. 50%. So you couple this idea with that authenticity is what's most important, and that greater than 50% of millennials feel that they cannot be themselves inside of a church building. When asked to kind of narrow that down, They had all kinds of things that they talked about the authentic. Different ideas, different causes. Some of the big things were, sermons and churches and mission statements and vision statements were focused on something contrary to what the church practiced. There were all kinds of things about moral failures of leadership, pastors, preachers, deacons, elders, things like that. But one of the biggest things when talking about when talking to the nuns, those who mark that they are not affiliated with any religion, a lot of their answers that they gave, and this is largely from Pew Research, some from Barna and others, a lot of the information that they gave was that they didn't believe that when churches are pushing right now, come one, come all, everyone is welcome, we want everyone here, that they didn't believe it. That they thought everyone meant some. When talking to those who mark that religion is important as millennials, and you ask them why, where this kind of inauthentic thing comes from, the overwhelming thing is that, hey, all the churches say, hey, we really, really want millennials. And we will bend over backwards to get millennials, and we will do anything to get millennials. That predominantly the approach meant we will add, a coffee bar, but we're not really going to do anything else. They said that what they felt that meant was that we desperately want millennials, and we'll do anything to get millennials, as long as once you get here, you then look just like us. It's this idea of come and be yourself and be you, because Jesus loves you no matter what you look like, no matter who you are. Now sit up straight, tuck your shirt in, cover your tattoos, and act like the rest of us. And that does not ring with authenticity to a generation that seeks authentic more than anything else. This idea is just something for us to remember, something for us to look like, or to look at. You notice Jenna said all of the things, the big flashy, the bright lights, the fog machines, the light shows, the guitar, the coffee bar, she's like, that's just not it. And one of the things that she said to me in another conversation, she said, the problem is that a lot of churches do all these things, right? They set all that stuff up, and then it's like the Field of Dreams approach, right? Like then we just sit back and we just wait for them to beat our door down. If we build it, they will come. No, they won't. Having a coffee bar out there in the welcome area does not mean that everyone at Pellissippi State is going to come beat our door down. We have to genuinely seek people that we want to come in. But then the really, really hard part gets in. We have to actually want them when they come. There's a cartoon I'm sure a lot of you all have seen. It shows a guy answering a door, and standing outside is a character that's supposed to be Jesus, and standing with Jesus are a whole bunch of people with him. There's young people, there's old people, there's people who are shown to be homeless, people who are shown to not look like church, people who are shown, carrying, one of them's carrying a beer bottle, and the guy looks back at his wife from the door and he said, I don't know why every time I ask Jesus to come, he always brings his friends with him. The prevailing theme is that, and this isn't something new, right? But the prevailing theme is that churches say they really want something, and then they get it, and they're like, yeah, we changed our mind. We were wrong. But what we see is that millennials are very innovative. They are very passionate. They are very passionate about causes. They are very passionate about things that the church is, or at least should be, very passionate about as well. And what they want is for the church's mission and vision statement to match the sermon, to match the ministries, to match where the money is going, to match what the church actually does, and not just what the church actually says. In that, though, you talk about powerful. I mentioned that we have these great awakenings throughout history, right? And I mentioned that if you look at them, they were all started by someone 10, 15 years younger than me. And I also said if you look at them, they come roughly about every 50 years, which puts us at one really soon. And I think a generation that we largely shortchange is going to be the cause of that, because they aren't not religious. They're not atheists. What they are is passionate about how do we take what the Bible says and do what the Bible says. They want to be a part. They want to be plugged in. They want to be involved. They want to be moving and changing. And here's the other thing that we need to remember, and I need to remember, considering I didn't consider myself a millennial until like 4 days ago when I figured out evidently I am, is that a lot of us older than the millennial generation, when we get challenged on something, or when someone comes up to me and says, hey, so I've got this way that I think might be a better way to do this. Pretty much a lot of us then don't hear anything for the next 10 minutes because we're trying to figure out why we are so insulted at the fact that they think the way we did it was stupid and ineffective. But then you hear Jenna, and Jenna says, man, my favorite thing in the world is if someone can challenge and shake everything I thought I knew. So there's this communication gap, right? Where when they talk about wanting to change something and we sit back and think, why is the way we did it broken and wrong? They don't even know what we're talking about. Because their point isn't that something is broken and wrong. Their point is we can always make something better, and we want to be a part of making everything better. Millennials are not an anchor dragging the church down. They are a catalyst that can move the church and launch the church forward into places we have never been or have not been in a very long time. And so we want to start understanding the value here. The value here. They would rather, talking about the inauthentic, said they would much rather have a church or a person or a company or an organization just openly disagree with them, or have a stance or a policy that they completely disagree with. They can work with that. They can work with that. What they can't work with is going to come and lead us in a song, and we're going to take this moment just to take in prayer. Pray in your seats. Pray for those around you. Do the thing that I'm convicted to do a lot, the circle prayer. God, I want the place to change. And so he says, okay, draw a circle, stand in the middle of it, and pray for everyone in the circle. And then you'll be on your way to making good changes. If we can pray for you, your family, things going on in your life, or answer questions for you about this Jesus that is the most important thing in the world to us and why that is, we would love nothing more. Come to the front, grab somebody down here. There'll be people on the back wall. Grab them as we stand and sing with Mark. Thank you.